Done.
Alrighty, welcome everyone. The webinar will begin at the top of the hour and will be recorded. Please connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag #LearningTuesdays and tag us to tweet anything that you learn from today's webinar, and we will be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. And once again, feel free to like our Facebook page, Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. The webinar will begin shortly. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we'd love you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city, or state, and your organization. Be sure to select panelists and attendees so that we can all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box, and we will be dedicating the last 20 to 30 minutes to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. The webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed on Friday to all who registered, and we are streaming the webinar on Facebook Live. We will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A, and we highly encourage you to respond. This just helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Also, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. They are always from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, although we do sometimes have special webinars like today, which begin at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, our partners at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and PBS will host PBS Unlocks Digital Learning and Science with Eleanor Wonders Why. This new series will bring quality programming to young children at home through television, helping us make sure that learning continues while thousands of Head Start and early childhood centers are closed, and when so many families do not have access to the internet. We hope you will join us. And again, on September 15th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we invite you to join us for Let's Ask the Teachers, What Could Success Look Like? This learning conversation will include teachers and teacher leaders in a discussion about what teaching in this new digital environment means and what it will take to be successful. We'll be sure to add a link in the chat box for more information and for registration for these upcoming opportunities. And joining you now is Yoli Flores, Chief Learning Officer for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and welcome and thank you to all of you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Prioritizing Learning Amidst COVID, Essential Guidance for Schools and Parents. And if you could advance the slide, Sierra, I will continue. You can just leave it there for a minute. I'm delighted again that you've joined us, and I'm especially delighted to be co-moderating this webinar with my colleague, Ambika Kapoor of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, whom I will introduce in just a moment. If you have been joining us for our weekly learning conversations since the onset of COVID, you will know that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has made learning loss recovery, parents as essential partners, and the parent-teacher relationship a high priority. Through the series and other efforts, the campaign intends to mobilize its networks to slow, stop, and reverse learning loss for the most vulnerable children in the early years and in the early grades, and work to ensure that we leverage this moment to deepen relationships between teachers and parents. This webinar is the 13th in the Learning Loss Recovery and Productive Parent-Teacher Partnership series. You can access the series on Clip, our online learning platform, and we'll share a link to Clip in the chat box momentarily. Today, though, we continue the conversation with a focus on ensuring that students receive instruction to address any unfinished learning in math and literacy from last year, but that they also receive instruction in their current grade. For that, we know we will need to prioritize the most essential elements of the curriculum, and we must help parents know what their children need to learn this year to stay on grade level. Our presenters will share the rich resources they have developed for schools, administrators, teachers, and parents and caregivers. It is our hope that you will help us share these resources with your school districts and the families in your community. And with that, I'll get us started by introducing my co-moderator, Ambika Kapoor. Ambika Kapoor is a program officer with the corporation's education program, where she manages the public understanding portfolio. Kapoor oversees grant making aimed at engaging parents, communities, teachers, and policymakers in addressing and demanding changes in education that ensure that all students develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions they need for future success. Previously, Kapoor served as Officer of Special Projects in the national program, managed grant making and communications for next generation science standards, development and mobilization. And she led the corporation's commitment to the Common Core Communications Collaborative. So I'm thrilled to introduce and welcome Ambika, and she will get us started. Ambika.
Thank you, Yoli, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. I'm looking forward to co-moderating the session with all of you. So I want to just add my warm welcome again to all of you for today's webinar. At Carnegie, as Yoli talked a little bit about the portfolio that I work, we believe that when families are empowered as true partners in their children's education, students thrive, schools are stronger, and the whole community benefits. And that's why we fund programs that bridge the gap between home and school. We want families to have access to the information they need to support their children's learning and for them to be able to act as effective advocates for change. And that's why we partner with organizations like Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Student Achievement Partners, and Seek Common Ground, who you will hear from today, and many organizations that you represent who are experts in supporting schools, districts, and families. These past few months have been highly disruptive, to say the least, for our education system. And the upcoming school year will be as likely as, to be interrupted as the one that just finished. It will also be likely that parents will continue to be asked to take on the role of educating their children at home. But regardless of the instructional role parents will be asked or be able to take on, we think that it will be critical that parents, caregivers, and teachers are aligned on the expectations for grade level work. For example, knowing what their child should be learning in literacy and math by the end of each grade. So for that reason, we partnered with our grantee Student Achievement Partners and Seek Common Ground to develop English language, arts, literacy, and mathematics family guides for grades K through 8 and high school. We hope to share these guides with you on today's call, but also hope that you might find them useful to share with the families and communities that are part of your networks. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to the presenters for today. It is my pleasure to introduce you first to Sandra Alberti. She is the Senior Fellow for Strategic Partnerships at Student Achievement Partners. Sandra joined Student Achievement Partners from the New Jersey Department of Education, where she served as the Director of Academic Standards and as the Director of Math and Science Education. Prior to working at the state level, Sandra held several district level positions, including school superintendent, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, principal, subject area supervisor, and high school science teacher. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology from Rutgers University and a master's and doctorate degree in education leadership from Rowan University. Next, we have Sandy Boyd. She is the CEO of Seek Common Ground, an organization she co-founded and launched in 2018 to ensure that education policy and practice is informed by those most impacted, including students, families, and communities. Prior to Seek Common Ground, Sandy was the COO at Achieve. Next, I'd like to introduce you to our commentator, Dr. Martha Bruckner. Dr. Martha Bruckner returned to UNO in 2017 as Executive Director of MOEC Collective Impact Initiative, a role designed to guide improvement of education P-16 in the Omaha metro area. Dr. Bruckner was most recently Superintendent of Council Bluffs School from 2007 to 2016. She worked previously in the Ralston and Millett school districts, in addition to 8 years as a faculty member and chair of the Education Leadership Department in UNO's College of Education. Now I will turn to Sandra and Sandy to share with all of you a little bit about their organization. Sandra, let's start by having you share a little bit about Student Achievement Partners first.
Thank you very much, Ambika. So I guess we can go to the next slide. Student Achievement Partners was founded about 10 years ago, certainly in the midst of the development of what was then Common Core state standards and is now kind of evidenced in a lot of different state standards work around what we can do from a standards perspective to assure that all students graduate high school prepared for college and careers. Our mission is absolutely to take actions that are based on evidence. There's a lot of things that we could all be doing to improve the outcomes for our students, but we are very much committed to taking actions that scale to improve student achievement. We have a very strong equity mission. We want all of our students, no matter what their zip code is, no matter what they bring to school, to experience a rigorous instructional experience from kindergarten all the way through high school. And part of our just way that we operate is very much committed out loud and in every action we take to measurable goals. And so we intend to absolutely measure and look at our outcomes, particularly in English language arts and literacy, so that more than half of the students nationally will be able to overcome the barriers that they face, specifically the barriers of racism and poverty that many of our students deal with on a daily basis.
Sandy, your turn next. Please share what the work about Seek Common Ground.
Thank you, Ambika. So picking up on what Ambika said earlier, we were founded in 2018, and our focus is really to serve independent state and community groups that promote consensus-driven solutions to education issues. And we really believe, and our work, I think, reflects this, that we can't really have sustainable education policy and practice if we don't do the hard work, and it is hard, of engaging students, families, educators, and communities in decision making. And we do that through an action accelerator process where we try to bring organizations together to create peer groups so that folks can learn through regular routines and through one another, and so that we can share expertise across communities, not just state organizations, but also community organizations. And so we are excited to talk more about how we think the family guides fit into this mission.
Well, let me have Sandra have you start with the backdrop on why the development of the policy instructional content. What inspired this work? What were you worried about? What was the moment asking you and us to do? And then talk about the content itself and what you hope the take-up will be and what the outcomes might be of that.
Thank you very much, Yoli. So we can move on to the next slide. And just by way of background, I know this is a pretty diverse group that has joined us this afternoon for this opportunity. Everybody from community and family advocates to those who, and I've recognized a few state level folks on the call as well. So just to give us a grounding in the content itself, and then to answer some of Yoli's questions about what we were worried about. We have been working and have seen tremendous uptake over the last decade in really coming to some common understandings of what it means for students to experience a rigorous college and career ready curriculum. And so I just thought I would start by laying some of that groundwork for all of you as we talk in a bit more detail, both about the family guides as well as about the priority instructional content. So when we think about math instruction, you know, from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, the kinds of things that we want to see happening in schools is a strong focus on the math that matters, rather than, you know, learning and relearning every single thing every single year. We have a progression that students focus on fewer content areas each grade so that they can build some depth of knowledge rather than lots of shallow little topics. We strongly promote the idea of coherence in math so that what students learn from year to year builds upon itself. And then finally, that we believe that all students deserve a rigorous math education where they have opportunity to build conceptual understanding as well as procedural skill and fluency, things that they should have at their fingertips, and strong attention to students being able to apply their math knowledge. So we believe all those things should happen in a math curriculum. And so moving to the next slide about what is a literacy curriculum looking like. All students, it is one of the things that best prepares students for any type of life after a K-12 education, that they should have access to complex text and its academic language. I know that's a big part of why you see all the evidence that you see by reading by grade 3 is this idea of what students can do with the literacy in front of them. Part of being able to access complex text is that we look for standards and curriculum that support students in the ability to read, write, and speak about the text that they're reading, not just put a text in front of a kid, but have them be able to have a command of that text itself. And all of this, both the complexity and evidence, building toward one of the most important aspects of literacy, and that is the ability for students to build knowledge from the text that they're reading. So no matter where they are, that they have access to literally the world around them in every content area through this regular practice of building knowledge through text. So moving on to the next slide, we'll start unpacking some of the reasons why Student Achievement Partners, in kind of a record-breaking pace, quickly, once COVID was upon us, decided to create this resource of the priority instructional content for this current school year. As was already said, we knew that this was going to be and is going to be an exceptionally challenging year for educators, for students, and for family. And when we started this work right at the beginning of April, we knew then, and even though we are at September 8th, I think we can probably still say the model or models of returning to school are quite uncertain. And there is absolutely a lot of continued concern from many, many different aspects about what happened last spring, how far students were able to go, what losses occurred. And we wanted to create a resource that helped us keep front of mind the concept that many, many have been working hard for years and years about keeping students in grade level learning. And so how could we create a resource that didn't keep us redoing what happened between April and June of last year, but really supporting students in the learning ahead of them? And we knew that without creating a very strong resource, we were very much at risk for absolutely broadening the inequities that we've been fighting so hard to address for the last year. So how can we make sure that we're all kind of operating from at least a base of a common playbook, so that when you're thinking of the most important instruction to dedicate our very limited and disrupted time in the year ahead, that we had some guidance that we could provide to educators and school leaders in that. And also thinking about the amazingly long list of things that, you know, school leaders, classroom teachers, and everybody in the system have to think about. What could we provide that would lift some of that burden, so that at least one thing they could say, okay, I don't need to worry about figuring out what the priority content for this year is. We already have a reliable resource we could go to that would give us that information. So moving to the next slide, then what we decided to do is take a look at the work that we've been doing, Student Achievement Partners has been doing for over 10 years now, about talking about those shifts that I talked about at the beginning. What is the most important, and how can we help amplify that content about what matters most, so that, again, we can have this forward thinking lens to not just get ourselves stuck in this remediation and makeup work, but actually to keep students learning accelerated in the year ahead, continue to hold high expectations for all students. And then also, as part of the design that we'll take a look at, is that we also wanted to give school leaders and teachers, and parents for that matter, an idea that we don't see the important work of fostering social emotional development this year and any other year, but particularly this year, as being separate from the work of supporting academic content. So the priority instructional content document is a document that clearly looks very much like the standards documents that most educators, school leaders, curriculum developers, and so on have looked at for years past, many different titles, very similar content. And it is a document that is in place for this school year. So what we did is we took a look at lots of the resources that we have already had in place and looked at how we can use all of the good work and resources to create some clear signals for prioritization. Those of you who might be familiar with some of this work, in math, we have had a document for many years about major work of the grade. That is not a new concept in math education. And we looked at how we can amplify the signal of priority within math, and how we can continue that this shouldn't be a completely unfamiliar or uncomfortable shift to priority, but really a further refinement of the messages and consistent with those same shifts that I mentioned in the opening. So the audience for the priority instructional content and our efforts to distribute this come in lots of different forms. One is publishers. So there has been a great uptick in particularly publishers who have been supporting kind of remote online learning resources to themselves integrate the priority instructional content into the guidance that they are giving district leaders to say, hey, listen, even at best 180 days aren't going to look like 180 days of school this year. Couple that with the stresses that we're coming into from last year. What kind of guidance can publishers provide within their curriculum to school leaders this year? We've also shared this with state agencies as part of a larger set of resources so that they can help make decisions around content guidance. We anticipate that district leaders who are then translating all this state guidance and publisher guidance teachers have in front of them every year will be able to modify resources and so on so that all students have access to equitable instruction. And then finally, very importantly this year and every year, is that professional learning providers are also taking up this same content to helping teachers make good decisions about how to support their work in the year ahead. So important to know that the priority instructional content just takes care of a huge but rather narrow aspect of what it will take to support students and teachers in the year ahead. It does not talk about the ideal learning schedule, the learning model. It doesn't talk about scaffolds and supports that we know are going to be particularly important this year for students with special needs, for English learners. And it also doesn't go so far as to talk about all of the mental health issues that are necessary. So on this slide, you see some examples of other very important resources that have been developed that address some of these other things. And when you get a copy of all this, I encourage you, depending on your role and your context, to pursue some of these other really important resources that are out there to further support this work ahead. And so just to give you a snapshot of what it looks like, this is the kindergarten kind of cascade of things that are in the math resource. So this first picture here shows an existing document that has been in place for many years that teachers who have been hard at work at focus and coherence and rigor, those 3 shifts in math, have used. And you'll see kind of the green squares, the blue and the yellow, which already have indicated major work of the grade, additional and supporting concepts. So these were already in place, and these were definitely the foundations in the math world. And so what you'll see next is that within this priority instructional content, we took a look at some of those priorities. And not only did we name them in the column all the way to the left, but we talked about some considerations that teachers might consider this particular year, whether it has to do with a kind of number, whether it has to do with bringing in that priority, but also thinking about where some of the gaps might have been from the previous school year. That's already integrated into this document, not so much for kindergarten, but for the grades that follow. And then after considering those priority content, then we're not throwing everything out here. So there still is other content, and depending on structures and systems and the students in front of you, we also give guidance for how teachers may address the remaining grade level content. And then moving on to the next aspect that I had already previously mentioned, super important, is thinking about within math and then within literacy, how might we facilitate some of the social, emotional, academic development that is going to be so important. So rather than treating math the way we always treat math and not thinking about those things and considering a whole other part of your day where you think about the social emotional needs, how can we actually integrate that into how students have conversations with each other, how they interact with their teacher? And so that is integrated in a discipline specific way within the math document. And then moving on to literacy, those of you who are familiar with the literacy work that we've been doing for the last 10 years, this will look absolutely familiar to you. And so it is absolutely continues to be the case that in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade, our focus continues to be on teaching students to read. And so you see the illustration with the green concentric circles, text always at the center, and then building knowledge and reading complex text is what supports that very much with the foundational skills in kindergarten through 3rd grade. So kindergarten through 12th grade, as we have always said, we continue to say it will be important to focus on grade level complex text and then also building knowledge through that text.
Thank you, Sandy. Before Ambika moves us forward, I just want to remind folks that if you have questions as you're hearing the presentations, please share them in the Q&A. We have plenty of time toward the end, at least 20 minutes, to field questions and to get into conversation. So to use the Q&A box. Also, you'll see links, including the link to the priority instructional content that Sandra just talked about, and we'll continue to share those links as the other speakers share their part of the work. So again, Q&A box if you have questions to share. And Ambika, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, Yoli, thanks, and thanks, Sandra. What I was going to just say right now is let's turn to families. So Sandy, let's turn to you. I would love to hear what inspired you to create these family guides, and why do you think they're necessary? And it'd be really great if you could walk us through these guides as well.
Sure. So just to start with a little bit of background and to answer Ambika's question, as we watched last spring and talked with families, and we saw obviously the huge disruption for families and students, and really the real differences across the country and how people experienced shutdowns. Some people got great information. Some people got way too much information. Some people never heard from their schools again. So it was really all over the place. So we sensed a real hunger for information about, well, what should my kid know and be able to do, and how can I be helpful? But at the same time, we sensed, and obviously this continues to this day, a real stress that families have as they try to juggle both healthcare concerns, economic concerns, jobs, school, all of the things that we've now placed squarely on families' shoulders. And knowing that we were probably going to go into this year, and as Sandra said, that turned out to be absolutely right, that this year would be just as disrupted as the year that just ended. And so we started to think about, like, well, what's a simple basic resource that we could give to families that would both give them actionable information about what their kids ought to be doing and where they might be able to help them, but also take some of the pressure off, that you didn't have to go through the millions of links and resources that were being shared, that there were things that were more targeted. And around the same time, I was talking to my friends at Student Achievement Partners and learned about the priority instructional content. And so we had this idea that it was worth really developing an aligned family guide that would enable families to understand what could and should be happening in schools in the next school year, as a way to both improve the communications between families and students and educators, but also to give families a sense of what they can and should be seeing. And so we began our work this summer on trying to determine what that might look like. So as I start talking about the guides, I just want to note a few things, and I'm looking forward to answering questions about these too. But as Ambika mentioned before, these guides will be K through 8 and one for high school. The guides will be published in English and Spanish. If you've been to our website over the last couple of weeks, you may have noticed that we had both K through 5 in English and K through 2, and a survey up so that we could get feedback from organizational leaders and families and educators. And we did receive a lot of feedback, which we will be incorporating into the final guides, which will be ready in the next couple of weeks. So what you see is the guide as it currently stood in draft before we asked for feedback. And the feedback's been pretty positive, but we also see some places that we are going to tweak. So again, K-5 in both English and Spanish in the next couple of weeks, 6 through 8 in high school at some point after that. A couple of things I really do want to point out. One is that we are keenly aware that there are lots of adults that are helping kids during this really tumultuous time. They definitely include parents at the center, but they also include caregivers and grandparents and neighbors and friends, and people are getting really creative in trying to organize their schedules in a way that's more manageable. And so these guides are really written for anybody who's helping a child learn this year. So we tried to write them as broadly as possible. We tried to keep them chatty and low pressure, and we tried to simplify language. And we also, though, want to be true to the content. We didn't want to dilute the content. We didn't want to do anything that would take away from the content. So we had a lot of back and forth with the experts at SAP about the language. You know, are we clearly communicating to parents what SAP is also communicating to administrators and to educators? Because we wanted to make sure that these were tightly aligned. And simplifying language in this space, I will say, is a challenge. It also pointed out to us, by the way, why it's so difficult to talk to families about what happens in classrooms, right? There's a lot of language that we use on a regular day-to-day basis that is foreboding to parents, and that parents simply don't understand. And so I also think this is a good introduction, even beyond the pandemic, to the work that ought to be happening in classrooms. There's a lot of white space on these guides. There aren't a lot of pictures. We did get some feedback from people that said, oh, we'd love to see more pictures of kids. But the more pictures of kids, the harder it is to read on a smartphone. And we know that there are kids that are, or there are parents and families that are actually doing everything right now on a smartphone. You know, we still have digital divide issues. We still have connectivity issues. So we wanted to make these as accessible as possible to the largest possible audience. So there's plenty of white space, and they're pretty easy to read on a phone. The guides are customizable, and for all of you on this phone, this is probably the most important thing to note. There's a Creative Commons license on the guides. They are done in Adobe Professional, which means that if you've got that software, it is super easy to take our logos off, put your logos on, to switch out pictures, to add your own content, to do supplemental materials. These were very much meant to be just the foundation. I can think of so many more things that could be added to these guides. So with that, let's go ahead and look at the first page where we get into what the guide actually looks like. So the first page you see here is mathematics. As I mentioned before, this is all based on the priority instructional content, but it's a subset of the priority instructional content. It is what the experts believe is the most important skills and knowledge kids need to have by the end of a grade, right? So if you're a parent or you're a caregiver, you're helping a child, and this isn't what's happening in a child's classroom in a month or so as things get going, or you want to have a conversation with your child's teacher about when you're going to see things, this will give you some clues about that. We also included in both the mathematics and the literacy section some everyday activities to support learning. I actually think we got a lot of good parent feedback on these activities. People love them. They would love to see more of them. I encourage you, if you're an organization that works with parents, think about how you can create more examples. People were very excited about the examples, but the examples do two things. They both give you ideas about things you might be able to do at home. Pretty simple, don't require materials, but I also think they help families understand the content a little bit better too. They sort of reinforce what the content looks like. And then on the next page of the guides, you see literacy, same idea. See the sections, what kids should know and be able to do by the end of the year in reading, writing, speaking, in the priority content areas, and then everyday activities to support that learning. On the next page, we realized this was an important thing to do early on. If you can go to the next slide, you'll see we included a glossary, which we will have a separate glossary of all these things put together too, but we realized that there was teachers talk to students about words, and then they sometimes students talk to their parents or caregivers about words, and they don't necessarily know what those words mean. And even for us, they kept coming up over and over again as we were looking at the content and skills. And so those words that are so important for people to understand as they're helping kids, we tried to make sure that we defined. And in some places in later guides, we actually have some links or some examples or some videos, so that if you don't remember what a denominator is, you don't need to be embarrassed about that. We're going to tell you what that is because we had to remind ourselves of some of these things as well. So these education words, see them in both literacy and in mathematics. And then the next thing the guide really wanted to focus on, and I know a number of people on this call are really experts at this, and I think this is another place where your expertise could really add additional content to this area, is we wanted to give parents and family members a language and a vocabulary to be able to speak with educators about academic matters beyond the how is my kid, how are they doing, but to actually ask questions so that you can engage in a conversation about where your kid is at, how you can support your child, and also begin to introduce some of this idea and these questions about, is your kid getting what they should be getting, right? Are you seeing, for example, is your child reading grade level texts? Are they being given access to grade level material, for example? So simple, I hope constructive ways to begin to have conversations with your child's teacher about these areas that count so much. And then finally, The guide ends with tools and resources. This was one thing we heard again and again, that you know, some people were getting just links and links and links and links to math, but not necessarily into literacy, but they weren't necessarily connected to the content and the skills that children should be learning in that grade. So we tried to just give a handful of resources in each grade that were really targeted for the skills and the content that children should be learning in that grade, to make it a little bit easier to maneuver through some of the resources that parents have been seeing, so people know exactly where to go to help their kids with a particular skill that they should be working on. And if we move to the last slide, this is what, if you go to seekcommonground.org/family guides, this is what you will, this is what you'll see now. You'll actually see K-5 in English and K2 in Spanish. And up until yesterday, we had a survey up there. And like I said, we've been taking feedback. We will be incorporating that feedback into our final guides. And as soon as those are done, we will make sure that Yoli knows that, and we will send the word out to folks that those guides are done and you can begin to distribute them. And again, I want to really encourage people, if you like what you see or you like parts of what you see and you really want to use these in your own work, I hope that you will. That will be the greatest compliment ever. And know that the content is freely available to use as you see fit with the folks that you work with. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Yoli and Ambika.
Thank you, Sandy. You know, the entire time you've been sharing this, I keep thinking I wish I would have met you and knew about the development of these guides about 3 months ago, when my niece, Melody, who just started 5th grade, was working. I was working with her. She was working with me to get ready for this year. And I didn't know how to help her in terms of math. I didn't know, I'm not worried about her reading skills. She's really, really good reader. But I had no idea, like, where should you be right now? And what do you need to have already as a real strong base to come into 5th grade? So I'm just thrilled that for me personally, I now have this resource to help Melody. And I know that I'm seeing the chat and other people are saying this is such a great resource. Thank you. This is such a great resource. So we're obviously all needing something to guide us as we help children. So thank you. I think we're gonna turn to Dr. Bruckner now. Dr. Bruckner is a longtime friend and champion of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, as you heard earlier. She led the work, the local GLR coalition in Council Bluffs, and as a superintendent, actually created the coalition in her community. We've asked her to come back. She's now leading up the Metropolitan Omaha Collaborative, and pays a lot of attention to this and is a real sounding board for us. We wanted to get her into the conversation and ask her for her insights, questions she might have, how she thinks both the priority instructional content and the family guides could be of value, and how we get them out there. So Dr. Bruckner.
Thank you, Yoli. Let me just give you a little summary of what I think my job is today, and I appreciate the ability to even be part of this. I think my job was to listen carefully to what I heard, just as 175 other people are doing, and I get the privilege of telling you what I'm hearing, which I think all of you could probably be doing the same thing. If you were taking notes and saying, how does this really apply to me? I'm trying to figure out how this might apply to all of us from different backgrounds. So first of all, I heard that the purpose of bringing this group together was to have information that both could be shared with school districts and with families, which is a wonderful opportunity because so often we're in two different silos. What do we do in schools? What do we do in families? The fact that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading has brought this together with this precise purpose of sharing similar information with both groups is wonderful. I love, along with that same theme, the names of those two organizations that we're working with. Student Achievement Partners really focuses on the fact that we can't do it alone, we have to have partners. And then Seek Common Ground is also a similar idea that we have to be doing this together. I had the privilege of meeting with these people virtually last Friday, and I learned so much more about them, which kind of let me do some research over the weekend to learn more about them. I love the fact that the Student Achievement Partners have pretty much made their information purposefully designed to help publishers, district leaders, state agencies, and professional learning providers. Excellent. They thought in purposefully about where would this go and how could we help all of those audiences. And those audiences are all people that really need the information. They say their mission was to substantially improve student achievement everywhere, and especially for the children that need the most support. I love that. Similarly, the mission of Seek Common Ground is to serve community groups that are trying to do the same thing. So I love the fact that these people mesh together, and I hope you noticed on the bottom right corner of all of the family guides, you see their two Student Achievement Partners and Seek Common Ground are kind of co-authors, which is by itself something to be celebrated. I kind of made some lists of things as I was listening this morning about celebrations that we should have of this work. First of all, as I mentioned when I started, the fact that the two organizations we're talking about, plus the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, are trying to connect educational organizations and community organizations and thereby serve families. That in itself is absolutely a celebration we should be noticing and jumping up and down about. They say that their goals are not necessarily what should be important in COVID times, but when I listen to their goals, when you hear them talk about what they're trying to do, I'm thinking to myself, duh, these should be our goals every single day. This isn't just because this is a special year. These should be our goals. So I celebrate their goals, and the fact that they jointly have talked about their goals, absolutely a celebration. I want to celebrate, and I saw several comments in chat that they're focusing on grade level reading, because as some people in the chat pointed out, so often, and we hear this in some of the work we're doing in MOAC, so often we put students in groups based on their reading level or their math level, and in grouping those people, we don't always let them get to grade level. And these folks are trying to push get to grade level. Don't forget grade level. That's so important. Absolutely a celebration for today. I celebrate the fact that there's a great place for free, usable information that's been absolutely reviewed carefully. You see where it came from. They're not charging us money to get to it. We should be jumping up and down with joy about this very important information is free to all of us if we just find it. And I don't know if we would find it if we wouldn't have had the opportunity today to bring them together. At least I wouldn't have found it. So maybe I'm only speaking for myself, but I want to thank the campaign for bringing these people together and kind of pushing it out to 175 other people that many of whom may know about it, but for some of us, it's really a good opportunity to learn. I love the fact that the family guides are a resource that are valuable, accessible, that use the information from the Student Achievement Partners. And you heard Sandy talk so much about how careful they are about language. My goodness, we have to remember that. Anyone that's known me very long knows that I remind us we can't talk in words that parents don't understand. And the fact that the family guides absolutely went above and beyond and even put a section in there to help inform parents of what the important language it is that they should use, and also helped parents formulate questions that they can use, are things that we should celebrate. The fact that they are being selfless in saying you can customize these. I saw a question in the chat that said, really? We can put our district logo on this? Yes, I asked that question last Friday and I heard Sandy, I see them nodding today. In the Metro Omaha area, we can put Raise Me to Read on these family guides and send them out. For each of our school districts, we've got 12 of those in MOAC. We can put our school districts, we can put the MOAC label on that. That's amazing because it absolutely reaffirms that we believe what these guides are saying. All of those are celebrations, and I applaud the work that's been done. In my research, after listening to these people last Friday, I reached out to some of the school district representatives I work with and said, so have you heard about this? Do you know about this? And Sandra kind of laughed with me as we talked about my own state, Nebraska, is sometimes pretty much on our own. We don't necessarily believe in that core curriculum, but we use it. We just call it the Nebraska curriculum. And so Sandra affirmed to me that she has worked with the Nebraska Department of Ed and many departments of ed across the country. And we are seeing these. We don't necessarily always recognize the fact that it's coming from these people in front of us today. I've got a couple of worries though. First of all, whether I'm a school district leader, a curriculum leader, all of the people that you talked about, or a parent searching for information, the competition out there for, look at this. I mean, it's almost like going by a circus tent and having people say, come over here, we've got it here, come over here. The competition out there is amazing. And so one of the struggles is, how do we get school districts, parents, families to these credible sites when there are so many other people out there yelling at us that they have the answer? That's a worry for me. Secondly, worry about timing. First of all, and when I talked to school districts, they said, these are great resources, but for some of us, they came too late. And I heard Sandra talk about, you know, if we could have done it 3 months earlier, it would have been great. Some school districts had to do this on their own. And so once they've gone to the work of doing it on their own, how do we help them gently get over to another site that may have it organize them actually in a better way than they did it themselves? So my worry is about timing. I also heard Sandy talk about the draft is over and the official ones will be coming out. I don't want those official guides to get lost in the ongoing hoorah from everybody else saying they have it. My final thought is, these are great resources and we probably should have these every year. And I heard Sandra say to have them every year, but maybe we haven't been looking for them. So I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in, and I give kudos to both Student Achievement Partners and Seek Common Ground and to the campaign for bringing us all together today. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And let me add the Carnegie Corporation of New York. The reason that the campaign found out about these important resources is because Ambika invited the campaign and a number of other partners that they work with and support to join a webinar like this. It was smaller, more intimate, to learn about them. So thank you, Ambika. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to get into questions, and thank you, of course, to Seek Common Ground and Student Achievement Partners. You've done all the work. We're going to get into questions in just a minute, but I did want to reflect on something you just said, Martha, on the issue of timing. So I was the first one. I said it a moment ago. I wish I would have known about this work sooner for my niece Melody, who's entering 5th grade. I didn't know where she was in terms of math. I even reached out to my colleague Sierra's father, who's a teacher, to spend an hour with us trying to help me figure out whether she was on grade level. What I'm excited about, so we might have missed a little bit of the past, is that this work could help shape the future. That especially in terms of the relationship between parents and their children and what they're learning, and the relationship between parents and their teachers, and to know what to ask, to be equipped to feel as that they are, because they are co-producers of good outcomes for their children. This is the work that I think is maybe the gift of COVID that has opened up this as a real possibility, because we now have seen that for once parents are being really appreciated for the role that they play. But imagine if they knew exactly all the time how to talk to their child's teacher, how to know the right questions, how to know what to do at home to supplement what's going on at school. That's the vision that the campaign embraces about how this work could become how schools operate every single day from here forward. And that's the work that we want to continue to do together. So with all that, there's some questions. I'll start, and Amika, feel free to join, pick a question, and then you could follow me if you want. I'm gonna start with the question that came in from Rebecca Ramir. She asked about the integration of English language development and home language support for English learners. So she acknowledges, as we all know, that it's a particular challenge to serve super diverse classrooms with remote learning. And are there any good models that you can point to? So I'll leave that to both either Sandy or Sandra.
I will say, absolutely, this is a big challenge. It is not one that we at Student Achievement Partners pretend that we have solved for, other than that we are also sharing this same kind of base content knowledge with others who are expert at supporting, diverse language settings, to operate from the same playbook, to say, if you're going to support translated materials, if you're going to support it in these priority areas. And so I am not sure that any of that has been 100% ready to go and finalized, although I know the right people are looking at it and are interested in thinking about that, because you would can imagine that what an exponentially more difficult task it would be if those same people who were focused on supporting diverse English learners first had to figure out which content should we work on. And so our contribution to the field, although certainly doesn't get anywhere near to the line that it needs to be, is to at least take that baseline off the plate of those experts in language development.
And I will say that, sorry, Sandy, I'll just say that we are thinking about and planning a future webinar specifically on English language learners. But sorry, Sandy, you were going to jump in.
No, I was just going to say, when I think about the potential for additions for supplemental material that would be great with the guides, and something around English language learners would be great. I've also heard a lot of feedback for special education. Same thing, right? Those are two areas with which neither Sandra nor I would say we have a particular expertise. And although the work has been informed by folks that are experts in those areas, it's like there's definitely a need for more additional materials for parents of children with those, in those circumstances. The Spanish guides, the guides that we're doing in Spanish, it is a straight up translation, except that we are working with the English Learner Success Forum to make sure that our resources there are some in English, because some of the resources are really for kids, right, for parents to direct their kids to. So it depends also on where a kid is at. Some will be bilingual and some will be in Spanish. Again, trying to be sensitive. So like is a parent looking at a resource because they're trying to learn the resource and then they can work with their kid, or are they going to put, direct their child to that resource? But we thought about that in the Spanish translation at least, but I think there's much more work that could be done in that area. And special ed, I just want to do a shout out for SPED too. I think there's more for sure that could be done.
And Bika, come on in.
I was just going to say, there was, following up to what you said around, special ed and other resources. There was a question that Michelle raised, which what I've been thinking a lot about too. I mean, these resources are absolutely valuable for parents to know if their kids are performing at grade level. But how do we, there's a flip side to this. What if your child is not performing at grade level? So, how do we support parents and teachers in having these tough conversations? So this was a question raised by Michelle, but this is also something that we have to sort of think about. Like at this point, we want to encourage that home to school connection, that partnership between teacher and family. And so how do we have some of those tough conversations? So Sandy and Sandra, what advice do you have?
I do think both Sandy and I agree that these are very strong advocacy resources that, whereas we would love to believe, when we think about, kids in every classroom across this country, that they are, this year experiencing a unique challenge in accessing grade level reading or grade level material. I think we all know by our collective commitments to the folks on the call, as well as those of us presenting, that this isn't necessarily a new challenge. And so, there are many barriers that parents and other community engagement people face in advocacy. And one of it is, to take from a page from Sandy's resource, the right language. And so I think integrating content into the campaign for grade level reading, in addition to all of the other great aspects of the campaign, I think is an important part of it. And the fact that this is something familiar. It's advocating within a playbook that is also being given to school and district leaders, that we're now kind of at least common ground, kind of coming to the same conversation and able to say more than just, I'm worried about my kid, but I'm worried that these aren't the things that my son or daughter or, child that, that I'm taking care of has access to. And I think that there's a lot of room for a lot of improvement. And I, can't underscore enough how appreciative we are at Student Achievement Partners, who haven't typically had parents in our audience of scope, absolutely believe that that is a critical part of this work. And so we hope that these become inspiration for advocacy, and that between the many people that are on this call and many other organizations who have access to this, that we can start a very real conversation. Because I think whether it's advocating for the children in your own home or in your district or in your state or what have you, I think we all have similar interests in mind in that way.
Yeah, and I will just say, like everything else, the relationship between students and teachers and parents and caregivers and teachers, it's all about relationship development, right? And I know a lot of folks that are on this webinar have done some good work in like how to develop relationships with your child's educator. And that's like really important. That is like the most fundamental kind of building block. And I think where we really tried hard was in the language that we suggested. We want, like, ideally you have a partnership with your child's teacher and you are asking these questions because you respect the educator as a professional and you want to do what's best for your kid, right? So there's a lot of language about like, how can I help? Who else can I talk to? What do I need to do, right? Like really trying to develop that relationship. Now, we're also keenly aware, and we're thinking about, if somebody else wants to do this, please tell me and we won't do it. I would love for somebody else to do this. That this actually also does beg this question about, like, there are some things that may not be happening in a classroom that a teacher has no control over, right? So like if you've got a complaint about like, wait, I'm not seeing grade level material, right? Or how come my kid's in second grade and we're still in first grade? That's probably a decision that was not made by the teacher. And so who you need to talk to once you find that out back to the advocacy point, are other people. You need to talk to your principal. You need to find out where those decisions are being made, if in fact bad policy decisions are being made that impact your kid. And that's hard, but we really, really wanted to encourage that relationship building with your teacher. So your teacher might tell you, like, this is the curriculum we've been given. I hear you. I need you to go talk to other, right? Like, there are limits to what educators can do. And we very much did not want this to be an adversarial relationship. This should be a partnership.
Thank you both for that. The next question I will ask, but I'm also going to invite Martha, given her experience as a superintendent, to share her thoughts. And that's, how do you communicate with parents who may have very, very low literacy skills? So even the family guides, and I appreciate that they're at such a great level for many, many, if not most parents, but there's some parents who will still have difficulty. And are there other ways that we could convey these resources, video or otherwise? And if you've been thinking about that, or Martha, in your role, how you might have solved for that? This is a question that comes from Lynette Marshall.
I wish I could tell you that I have the answer. Oh yes, we answered that. I don't. It's an excellent question. It's not just a question about the literacy level of the parents. It's the ability of the parents to get to the resources. Both of those are problematic. My daughter-in-law, who has 3 elementary age children, would absolutely love these parent guides, and she would find them. Her kids may not need them. A lot of the kids who really would need them may not have parents that have the technology skills or the connectivity, or you just brought up the literacy ability to understand them. And I don't have a good solution. Your off-the-cuff comment about videos is a good one. I know there have been some grade level reading groups, I know of some in Iowa, who have done a series of videos to model for parents how to do this work. That may be an answer, but that's going to take more than school districts or community groups. That's going to take some very intense attention to how do we reach those parents who either won't find us or won't understand us when they find us. It's a great question. It's a difficult issue, not just this year, but every year.
Thank you, Martha. Sandy, Sandra?
Yeah, I would say, I think this is a place where community groups, whose mission it is to represent the community, right, can be helpful in figuring out what else the community needs, right, to help understand, can hold events, can hold conversations, can figure out other ways to communicate the information. I do agree that videos would be really helpful. And we also have heard in feedback that, like I said before, even more examples, maybe even more introductory examples, right? That there's a lot more that could be done. And I think, especially if these are not just a pandemic family guide, but live on, right? I think there's a lot of work that could be done to make them as broadly accessible as possible. But I think community groups play a big role in that. And then also figuring out what's the best way to communicate with their folks.
Yeah, I would just add that 2 things. One is that I think some of the leading curriculum providers who are integrating some of this are themselves thinking about parent videos in multiple languages and thinking about how to integrate parents into the support for these resources, as that is an increasingly common model for this year. But I, know that I'm preaching to the choir when I say a lot of these challenges and inequities are not new to this year. And so one of the things that I'm strangely thankful for is that we are having really out loud conversations and engaging people in challenges that have existed, probably since the beginning of this education system. And it's interesting in conversations how often people act like this is a brand new thing, that we have parents who don't know how to support their children, or, people who don't feel like they have a voice in advocating for, struggles and challenges that they're observing in their own kids. And so I do hope that this is one of the things that we, the digital divide, that we don't stop advocating for, and that we don't stop even when, masks come off and, everything else goes away, that these are inequities that have existed. And so hopefully these efforts, help us not to slide backward, but that we can continue to move forward, and in what we have awakened to, getting further than we were before the pandemic.
In a previous year, we might have at a parent meeting for my first graders handed out the parent guides or sent them home in the kids' backpack. We don't know which parent opens the backpack. We don't know which parent reads what's in there. So you're right, Sandra, it's not different. It's just this year it's really vital. They're great, great resources, but how we help people find them, use them, understand them, both people in schools and family members, is really an important question. And perhaps that's how the campaign can help, because anyone on this call who represents one of those campaign sites can certainly grab onto those and start using them in ways that will get the attention out there. They're great, and the fact that they're by grade level gives you the opportunity to tweet them out individually. So you have a first grader, did you know about this? So this is a good step. We're never going to solve the problem, but it's a great attempt to make it better.
Well, this is the first step. It was our initial wanting to share the guides, but we will have other strategies to maximize and leverage our network, which has a pretty extensive reach across the country. I think over 60,000 schools, over 3,000 school districts. So this is step one. We have more, and we're just thrilled to be in partnership with all of the folks on the webinar. There's an interesting question from Marie Donovan around private schools, and wondering whether these guides could also be for the private school sector, and whether you see a take up in that space, whether you're partnering with that group of families and educators. So Sandra and Sandy.
I would say we certainly aren't excluding that group by any stretch of the imagination. And so the same, advocacy groups and policy leaders who have outreach, partner organizations that we work that have outreach to the private school sector would have opportunity to access this, and individual teachers in our own network, who work in those, and we welcome anybody and everybody. And I think the fact that both of these resources are centralized and then can be taken up by anybody, I think is important. Sometimes it helps to put logos of national organizations on there. Sometimes it helps to take them off. And so that is one of the design features of this. I can absolutely imagine a private school network, that decides, hey, here's what we created for all of, our parents for this year. And we actually don't have a problem with that, because as I said, as long as the right people are getting the information to support students, we're good with that. But if folks have ways that this could be better connected to that group, all the better.
It's actually a great idea. And it occurred to me that both, but the Catholic Schools Association and the independent schools sector folks are people that we ought to add to our distribution list, because, we just know from previous work with them, and that Sandra did with them too, that they pay a lot of attention to what's happening in states and state standards and state assessments, because they never want their kids to not be, to fall behind where their public school counterparts might be. And they know kids go in and out of those systems, so they are keenly aware of that. So that's another good place for us to distribute. So
and I would add to that, Sandy, if my little corner of New Jersey is anything like the rest of the country, not that I pretend that it ever is, but we've seen more kids enter into private schools this year when models have been all over the place, whether kids are learning remotely and their parents want them to learn in person, and it's only in private school settings that opportunity is there. We're seeing an incredible shift in the proportion of students that are being educated in private school settings. And so I would definitely emphasize, and support any efforts that we have to support that, so that we have a better continuity and coherence of education.
Hey, Yoli, can I bring up, or can I add something to what Martha said before? And I know you expressed this too. While we just had this idea in early summer to do this, I do think, based on polling and other things that we're hearing, that parents are rightly right now focused on, what does it mean to go to school? How do I figure out this crazy schedule, my crazy schedule? How do I keep everybody safe? How are my kids doing emotionally? Like, we've got a lot of things going on, and that the focus at this moment really might not be so much about academics, but it will be. And so I do think that these guides are sort of perfectly timed kind of back to school materials, like late September, October. And so for those of you online who are connected with districts or work at a district who really want this to be like a district resource, I was so excited when somebody put that in the chat box. Like, please, no, I think that's, Sandra and I think that's like the perfect place for these guides to be. And especially if you know that your district is using the priority instructional materials, then these guides are a no-brainer resource, because this is exactly what your schools are already doing. If your schools want to use this resource, but they're not doing the priority instructional content, they might get pushed to after parents start asking questions, right? So it could go both ways. Absolutely would be so thrilled to see districts or partners in districts who encourage their districts to use these around back to school time, because I do think that's when parents are gonna, once they settle into whatever the crazy routine is of this fall, they will then start to focus on what's actually happening in the classroom. What kind of work is coming back? What does the homework look like? How do I support my child? And then I hope these guides will kind of be there for them when the time is right.
Great message, Sandy. And I think that's exactly right. I think parents are right now worried about the safety going back. We do know they're worried about their kids falling behind. Poll after poll after poll that has been conducted this summer by various groups tell us that. So I think they'll start to weigh, as soon as everything is settled, as you've said, what's the work? What do I need to know? What does my child need to know? I'm gonna start wrapping us up. I know that one of you answered a question, but I'm gonna have you say it out loud because it came up several times, and that's about people adding their own logos onto the resources. So you've clarified that, you've said it a number of times, which I think people are very appreciative. I know Nebraska in particular, but there are other states that like to do their own thing. If people need help, so if they don't have Adobe, for example, is there a resource you could point them to figure out how to do that, how to put their logo, take theirs out? Is there a place we could send them for some TA?
Yeah, you can, for now, you can email me, or on one of the slides, we had a couple of different contacts from Seek Common Ground. You can email me or Christina Cover, and we will work with our graphic designer to help you figure out what you need. It's my understanding, there we go. It's my understanding that most districts or professional suites that have Adobe actually do have access to Adobe Professional. So we tried to use the easiest possible thing, but if it really doesn't work for you and you need some help with it, we will figure it out. So just email me or, yeah, Christina.
Great. And the links to the deck with all of these wonderful emails were in the chat box, and you'll also receive a post-webinar summary of today's webinar with the link to the decks and to the bios and other resources that have been discussed today. So you will have all of these handy if you don't have a minute to write them down. So let me just start wrapping up. I want to start by thanking Ambika, first and foremost, for being my co-moderator, for introducing us to this really important work, and for making today possible. Thank you to Sandra. You noticed that there were two Sandras, one Sandra, one Sandy. Hopefully we didn't get them mixed up, but thank you to both Sandra Alberti and Sandy Boyd. Sandra from Student Achievement Partners and Sandy from Seek Common Ground. I feel like you're my two new best friends, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with you. And thank you to Dr. Bruckner. Your insights, as always, were right on. You asked, you picked up on the right themes, the insights. Thank you for sharing your worries. It gave us, I think, some things to think about, and for always being such a great partner to the campaign. Thank you to all of you. I do want to remind you, just now is a poll that is popped up on your screen. If you would fill out that poll to let us know what you thought about today's webinar. It always helps us do a better job and continue to meet your needs if you're in our network, and even if you're not, if you're a new partner, a new viewer to the webinars and participant, we'd love to hear your feedback as well. And Sarah, if you could take me to the next slide. I'll just, yes, thank you, and we got through Q&A. Sierra mentioned this at the top of the hour. These are our two upcoming webinars. One is this afternoon in about an hour and a half. With PBS, who is another partner of the campaign. They are launching today a new series called Eleanor Wonders Why. And the reason that we've partnered and think this webinar and other webinars that they've done with us is so important is that we know too many children from low-income families have had little to no full year instruction. Their Head Starts closed, their early learning centers closed, and many families do not have access to the internet. But we do have public broadcast media, and PBS has stepped up to the plate, as they always do, with quality content for young children. And so here is one of their new products, their new programming with Eleanor Wonders Why, and so we hope you will join us today at 3 Eastern. And then next week, we're excited about bringing the voice of teachers to our webinars. Our friend, colleague, partner, Roberto Rodriguez from Teach Plus is joining Peggy Brookins in lifting up the voices of teachers and what they think success could look like and how we get there in the backdrop of COVID. That's next Tuesday, September 15th at 3 Eastern. So we hope you will join us. Thank you for being with us today. Have a safe and wonderful week. And again, thank you to all of our presenters. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.